What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Final Destination review series, and we are almost at the finish line. Tonight I'm seeing Final Destination Bloodlines, and that review will be out tomorrow. But before we get to the new one, we got to cap off the older film. So today we're talking about Final Destination 5. And despite the fact that Final Destination 4 was such a detrimental stain on this franchise, got horrible reviews, to this day, I've yet to talk to anybody that does not absolutely despise that movie. It was a big financial success. So even though they titled it The Final Destination, as we know, anytime you do that, it ends up being a success and they do one more. So Final Destination 5, just 2 years later, came out, was also shot in 3D. And this is one that I also did not see in the theaters because I'd pretty much just abandoned all faith and all hope in this franchise after how bad the fourth one was, and I expected no different from the fifth one. And it wasn't until the fifth one came out and actually got pretty good reviews, had a lot of people talking about how much better everything was, a bunch of people hyping up the ending like crazy, that eventually when it did come to home video, I did check this thing out. And while I have not watched it since, it was a massive improvement. But a lot of people, just like with Final Destination 3, seem to really love this installment more than a lot of the other ones. And so I was really looking forward to giving this a second watch finally. And the premise of Final Destination 5 is going to sound incredibly familiar, where you have a group of co-workers going off on a bus to a work retreat when the suspension bridge they are driving over suddenly collapses and everybody dies in violent ways. But one person has a premonition of this and is able to pull off a number of them off the bridge before this tragedy strikes, and then death comes back for them one by one. Starting off with the positives for Final Destination 5, I think the opening premonition here is easily one of the strongest of the entire franchise. Even though they're definitely working with a lot more CG here, it's much more convincing, and this bridge collapse is one of those things that preys on a genuine fear that a lot of people have, where we have to get from point A to point B, but the whole time we're on that bridge, all we're thinking is, please don't fucking fall. And this thing really amps up that fear to the nth degree, where you have streets collapsing below, you have people falling off to their death, you have people getting crushed with cars, you got one guy who, the best part of this entire opening, where he's hanging on for dear life, and this molten tar, whatever the hell it is, where they're working on the road, asphalt just pours over onto him, starts to melt him, and he slides off, and the skin from his hands like peels off almost like the skin of a potato after you boil it, and it's just a gnarly gore effect. And so this is not only a very ambitious opening sequence, but it's one that I think is just, it has very individual cool moments, and it makes for an awesome opening to this film. Much like all of the sequels, this film really embraces the dark humor of the situation, and I think that this one, alongside Final Destination 2, does some of the more commendable jobs at actually having really good humor. Some of it is just the situations that they're in, some of it is the dialogue being certainly better written than the previous installment, some of it is the actors and the type of caricatures that they're playing. Like, you got the one guy here who's the absolute nerd hornball, who is just the most disgusting dude in the world, but he just doesn't care. He takes 100% of the shots that he wants to take. And there's a lot of really good self-aware humor here, where even in some of the kills, towards the end of the film especially, some of them are meant to be gags, more so than something that's supposed to put you on edge or something that's supposed to make you squeamish. And I think that that balance really works well for Final Destination. Just like I said in the second film, I want to be on the edge of my seat. I definitely want to squirm, but there's times where the violence, the gore, the heightened level of ridiculousness of this concept does elicit a bit of an uncomfortable laugh, and I like it when a movie can do that effectively. Final Destination 5 does it effectively. A couple of elements that this thing brings back in that we have not seen since the first couple films that I really appreciated, one of which, of course, is Tony Todd. Now, I got called out a little bit in the comment section of Final Destination 3 for me saying that Tony Todd not being there was a negative, when I said that the way he was utilized in the first two films wasn't exactly the best. And I don't think those statements are contradictory, because I do think Tony Todd is a very important piece to this franchise. I think his presence and his exposition is a piece of the DNA, but I never really thought they found an organic way to do that. He's always this weird, mysterious character, and especially in the first film, there's really no discernible reason why Alex and Clear interact with him in the first place, and it's just odd that they meet this random mysterious guy, they get all the information that they need, and then it's off to the races. I think that the two things can be true at once. And Final Destination 5, I think, actually finds the best way to incorporate Tony Todd, where he's still very mysterious. He's still very curious of, like, how exactly do you know this information? But he's a little bit more vague. He's a little bit more mythic with the way that he says things. It's not so matter of fact. And the fact that he's a coroner who's there picking up the bodies of a couple of these newly accidental deaths of the people that survived this bridge collapse, it creates a little bit more of an organic situation for them to bump into him versus, hey, let's go look at the body of our dead friend that we're supposed to be grieving.
Death doesn't like to be cheated.
But anyway, now that I'm done defending myself needlessly, Tony Todd, I do think, does bring something to these movies. There's a reason why all of us, despite, being heartbroken that he had passed away not too long ago, we're like, oh, please God, tell me he filmed already for Final Destination 6 because he's such a big piece of it. So I like his scene here. I like the fact that he's got a little bit more swagger to him with his whistle, and he feels like more of a character in the movie versus just a random thing that they decided to cast Tony Todd in to shield us from the fact that the character's usage is a little bit ridiculous. And another element that I really liked that we haven't seen since the first film really is that there's an actual investigation here. When you have this massive bridge collapse and you have somebody that had a premonition detailing it was going to happen before it happens, naturally that should always bring some kind of law enforcement attention. And so you got Sterling K. Brown in here as somebody who's very much keeping an eye on the lead character and very curious if he had something to do with the bridge collapse, if he has something to do with the subsequent deaths of these people, because he's always around, and of course he knows them. It's not quite as in-depth of a subplot as the first film, but I still like the fact that it was there. I think it's necessary. I think it gives a little bit of extra story in this movie that makes sense for it to be there and not be just a distraction or some kind of needless fluff. And thank God I can tell you that the kills are yet again a high point of a Final Destination film. I think that Final Destination 5 has a couple of the best kills of the franchise so far. That gymnastics kill for me is absolutely the standout. I think that it's one of the best executed kills, no pun intended, as far as the Rube Goldberg side of things, where they're showing all these different elements like the leaking air conditioner and the fallen screw and the balance beam, plus the bars and the bowl of whatever that is, the little sand grit and the fans. Like, they keep showing you all these little images, and the whole time you're just on the edge of your seat, gritting your teeth, wondering how exactly is this going to fit together? Is she going to step on the nail? Is she going to fall into the bowl? Is the air conditioning going to fall and crush her? You don't know until it happens. And when it happens and she gets bent backwards, there's few times where you get a visual of an injury that actually gives you like a phantom pain watching it, and this is one of them. But there's a lot of other good ones here too. You got the laser eye surgery scene, which another thing that people have always been afraid of. If they have glasses and bad eyesight, it's like, well, let's just shoot a laser into your eye and then you'll never have problems again. Fuck that. I'll wear the glasses. That was a really good executed scene because of not only the same thing where you're a little tense, not wondering how exactly this is going to happen, and the way that it visualizes it as it's happening is another just wince-inducing kill, and some other ones that are fun as well. And the main reason why this one is able to succeed so much where the last one failed, aside from just lackluster writing, is that the CG that they use is significantly better, as well as the 3D effects. Like, you can actually watch this movie and forget the fact that it was shot for 3D, because it's some of the best utilized 3D of a horror film probably ever. It's not distracting and ridiculous and having this weird novelty to it like the fourth film and a lot of other films. This one actually feels like it's a movie that just has some of these effects that would have been cool to see in the theater, but they don't look weird and distracting watching it on a 2D format at home. And by no means does it scale down what they're able to do with these kills because they're just trying to have random shit fly out at you. They find little organic moments to have something, like whenever the main character stabs a guy with the rotisserie skew and it just goes out through him, but it doesn't look like ridiculous and corny like some of the old 80 films. It actually goes off to the side. And so this, for me, is just a massive improvement on every level, both with the style of the kills, with the execution of them, with the CGI and how good and how real it looks, and not having that nasty, uncanny valley, and the utilization of the 3D effect, which normally kills a movie like this the second it's out of theaters. And the last thing that I will say here in the positive is actually the first time I believe that I've been able to say this for any of these Final Destination films, and that's that I like the ending. Now, Let me say this right off the bat before I get to all the good stuff. I do find the ending of this film to be incredibly overhyped. I found it to be overhyped at the time when, it wasn't spoiled for me, but I saw so many people, oh my God, greatest twist ending ever. And I get to it and I was like, oh, okay, that was cool, but not worthy of best of. I just don't think. It's not an ending that really hits on that level for me. And I do think that there's certain things about the third act and the ending that don't completely come together, like this new rule about if you kill somebody, you can take their place. The movie really doesn't incorporate that in a good way. Like, that's a really cool thing to add to the lore, and it's something that changes up the third act, where suddenly it becomes a movie where their death is not the main antagonist, it's one of their friends coming after them. But the way that they execute that actual rule is a bit messy, and it doesn't completely come to fruition if they still end up being dead by the end of the film. So cool idea. I don't think they execute it in the best way, but let me get that out of the way to say that I still really enjoy the way that this film wraps up. I think that the tonal shift in the third act is nice. It feels like we're actually building towards something, not just kind of petering out and figuring out how to close everything out like the last 4 films have done to some degree. So I do like the element of the third guy coming after them and trying to kill the girl who was never part of the premonition because of his grief over his girlfriend, and him wanting to earn his spot back off of Death's list, and how that kind of gets flipped around on him. And the whole fight scene that happens inside of the kitchen, I think, is executed pretty well. And then, of course, the actual ending of the film, where you get the 2 surviving characters that are finally going off to Paris on this plane, and the big twist reveal that this is actually a prequel to the first film, not a sequel, and they're on Flight 180 as Alex Browning and everybody else is getting pulled off from the first film. I think the idea of that is very cool. It's a very nice, organic way to kind of bring everything full circle. If this was the final destination, that's a good way to wrap everything up and have everything have closure, which they absolutely did not do with the final destination. I do think there was a way for them to let that reveal linger a little bit more. It feels like as soon as they get onto the plane, they show Alex and them getting dragged off. I think you could have had another minute or so of dialogue or something to let us feel a little more safe versus just kind of rushing into that reveal. But the reveal is still cool. The revelation is still cool. Having us have that revelation of, oh yeah, they have been using technology from the year 2000 or 1999 back all throughout the entire movie, and there was all the cars from the 90s, and the only cell phones we saw were the old flip phones, like things like that were very much not a distraction throughout the movie. Suddenly you're like, oh, that was a pretty cool way for them to execute that very sneakily. And even just the effect of the plane crash, like when the flame hits him, as I said, the CGI in this film is significantly better than the CGI of the last couple of them, actually. And so when his face is like melting in the fire, looks pretty damn real. So I do like the way that this movie wraps up. I think it's easily the best ending of any of these films thus far. Now moving on to the negatives. And the one thing that I'll say here, which is kind of a small negative, is that even though this is a significant improvement, and I do think it's actually one of the best films in the franchise, the concept is wearing a little bit thin at this point. I said in the 4th film that even if that film was halfway decent, I think at that point it was going to start to feel a little bit tired. And even though they gave a little bit of an attempt to inject something new here with that extra little rule in the lore, it's still very much a templated Final Destination film. So I'm holding out a lot of hope that maybe this 6th film, granted it's been like, 11 years, maybe even more since we've seen the last one. 14 years, actually. God damn. I'm hoping, since it's been such a long gap, that they're going to try to do something genuinely different with the story. We'll see here in a few hours. But yeah, still entertaining. But at this point, I think Final Destination 5 is where I really start to feel like, okay, we're just doing the same thing over again. Like, cool, but give me something else. The other negative that I have is that, I don't think the entire cast of characters here is entirely compelling. I don't think that all of them are bad. Some of them are better than others. You have the lead character here with his hopes and dreams of being a chef in France. I think that some of that's a little bit interesting, mostly because I'm a foodie. I think that what's going on with his friend, who ends up being the antagonist in the third act, is somewhat interesting just because it's a little bit of a different path to take with some of these characters. All the other ones I think are incredibly dispensable. Like, you have the whole romance angle here, the whole romance subplot, the Love on the Rocks thing, where the lead character from the jump street of this film is trying to get back together with the girl that he was dating, and she's kind of unsure about things. I just never really found their relationship or their chemistry to be all that compelling. I never cared whether or not they got back together or not. And even in the third act, when he's trying to save her, I'm like, whatever. If he doesn't, I'm not, it doesn't matter to me. So if they're going to go for subplots like that, which they should, to give us a little bit of something else to chew on in this film, I think they could have done that a little bit better. And then all the other dispensable characters, they're pretty much caricatures. You know, some are okay, some are fun, like the douchebag womanizer character, but there's nothing to write home about here. I still think that the first film has probably the best cast of characters of all of these, and Final Destination 5, not the worst, but somewhere in the middle. They're okay. They're here to get killed. But honestly, as far as specific things that I can call out about 5, that's about it. Those are the only two things I think held back this film a good bit. And, other than that, it doesn't have the freshness of the first one. It doesn't have the freshness of the excitement of the second sequel, which kind of ties into what I said about this feeling like it's starting to run its course a little bit. So really solid movie overall, not a whole lot of individual flaws, just doesn't have the nostalgia factor or the wow factor that I had walking into the first couple films when I revisit this one. So overall, guys, this one is definitely a return to form, a major improvement after the blunder of the fourth film, and honestly, one of the best films of this franchise. I could see why a lot of people would like this one. I'm actually surprised more people don't love this one the way that they seem to love the third film, but nonetheless, for such a consistent franchise, you're going to have that type of thing happening. So totally dig this one. Can't wait to check out the sixth one later on tonight. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. I'm also going to put a playlist up here of all of my Final Destination reviews and incoming rankings. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future, including my review of Bloodlines and those rankings that'll be coming your way. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.